Hi, this is Suhailah, and this is Grow With Me by Suhailah, the podcast, and this is episode 10. We made it to episode 10 of my entire podcast, and this is part 4, the final installment of this series that began 3 weeks ago, and the name of the series is Wade in the Water, Roadmap to Healing with My Energy Healer.Part. This is part 4, and the name of this is Integration and Moving Forward. Integration and Moving Forward. We had part 1, July 1st, part 2, July 8th, part 3, July 15th, and now July 22nd, which happens to be my birthday today. I am recording this in advance, so I didn't even realize that until I just looked at the calendar. So this will be released on my birthday, so it's very appropriate. And this is the final installment of this series that I said began 4 weeks ago. So yeah, I released this a little bit off my podcast schedule, as I've been saying. I normally release my podcast twice a month, every other week, give or take a few days. I decided to release this series, which was one conversation. It was over 2 hour conversation with Kim. I broke it up into 4 episodes. So I released them once a week because I thought it was so important, so timely, so useful. And I wanted people to get it as soon as possible, but I wanted a little bit of space in between. So that's why it was off schedule a little bit. I'm going to go back to my normal schedule after this. And I hope you enjoyed. In this episode, we close the series out by exploring what it means to truly integrate the healing work. Kim walks us through how to trust the new version of ourselves, to stay grounded when old patterns try to creep back in, and honor the shifts we've made without needing to be perfect. So I think it's just going to help with sustaining growth and learning to trust ourselves, and mostly just choosing peace. Peace, especially for those of us who like to perform. For those listening who are more performers, choose peace over performance, even when things get messy and look messy. Your peace is the most important thing. And I hope that this series, these episodes have really helped guide you a little bit. It's a roadmap. It does, I think it's up to us to create our unique blueprints for what it looks like. If you go back and listen to part 1 and part 2 of this series, we talked about that. There's no one size to healing, right? Healing is not one size fits all. What works for one will not work for all. So I hope you got that. I hope you get it. I hope this is giving you a little bit of information, a little bit of just something that you can use on this journey of this life that we are living that is not always so easy, right? And so that's all. Let's get into it. I'll just read a quick disclaimer. The content of this podcast is for information and inspirational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace professional, medical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. Always seek support from a qualified professional for any mental health or medical concerns. The views shared are personal and do not represent any official or clinical guidance. Any official or clinical guidance. So let's get into it. Episode 10. And I hope you enjoy it. So this is a good conversation. The last 2 things I wanted to ask you, Kim, is just a little bit about how the ancestral piece comes up in your work, because you often will say, this is coming up from your mother's side, your father's side. You can tell what's mine present, what's my childhood, what's mine, or what's my parents. And then the other thing, the last question after that is, when do people usually find themselves at your door? Someone like you. What is their point where they are like, I need this? How does that happen? So those are the last 2 questions.
Okay, let's start with the ancestral question. We are sentient beings. We're always exchanging energy with each other. Mm-hmm. So all of us are carrying a bunch of energy that is not ours. You're carrying your coworkers' energies. You're certainly carrying your partner's energy, your kids' energy, and of course you're carrying your siblings' energy, your parents' energy. Because those are the people we're in close capacity with, and we share these emotional bonds with. Mm-hmm. So that's just like I said, that's what we are. We're emotional beings that are constantly exchanging energy. The other thing is the way I see it, or the way I experience it, is almost like emotional DNA or energetic DNA. Mm-hmm. So the same way we get physical DNA from our mom and our dad when we're conceived, we also get just a chunk of their energy as well that came from their parents. And And a lot of this gets passed down, and science is starting to back this. Like, we can see now that trauma affects the DNA, and trauma is passed down for up to 7 generations. So if you have a long history of really angry men or alcoholic people in your family, or just like a lot of internalized shame, whatever it is, that can all be passed down. And it doesn't mean you need it. Like, at some point, by the way, I'm not really big on negative emotions, labeling things negative.
Yeah.
You either need it or you don't need it, but everything is useful at some point or you wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
So carrying these kind of ancestral energies did serve us at one point. It made us belong to our family. When we're born, our parents are our gods, right? They created us. They keep us alive. They're our everything. They're our source of everything. And so how do we, as really needy little babies, get to make it to adults to procreate, right? We got to make sure they like us. And who do people like? They like people, like, we all like people who are like us, or that we view like us. And so it's in a kid's best interest to mimic those parents energetically, physically, emotionally. I'm part of you, right? Like, I'm one of you. I'm one of the tribe. Don't kick me out. So then we become adults and we don't need to be part of that tribe anymore. These energies just don't serve, right? That was the only way maybe that's the only way it served us, was like trying to belong to that tribe. And then we move out and we're like, oh, this isn't serving us anymore. This, all this anger I'm carrying. So then it's time to let it go, which it's way easier. Listen, I said it flippantly, like, oh, it's so easy. Listen, I remember when I first started doing this work myself, like on myself, right? When I first started this process, I was working with this channel and he was saying, I just was so mad. That's why I called him. I just woke up just enraged, and I made an appointment with him, and he said, whose anger is this? And I realized it wasn't mine. It was my dad's, right? And he's like, great, now let it go. And I was so angry because I was like, if I could just let it go, don't you think I would? Like, I wanted to punch him in the face. Because sometimes you can. Sometimes it's enough to know just that it's there and it's not yours. And we've all had that experience where we had an insight or a perspective shift, and it shifted everything about the way we felt. Yeah. That can happen, but sometimes it's a lot harder.
Yeah. And sometimes we can get addicted to our emotions and our feelings and just not want to let it go. And also sometimes,
well, especially if we don't know any different. We don't know who we are if we don't have this anger. Yeah. And that's also part of the work. Like, sometimes you have to develop these other foundations simultaneously while slowly releasing this other energy, because that's what's going to give your body, your system, your subconscious, all these pieces of yourself permission to start to let it go.
Yeah.
Because you have to know who you're going to be when you live without it. Like, we're all smart people. Listen, the majority of people, I'm of the belief that people are not assholes. Nobody is sitting around consciously like, you know what I want to be is miserable.
I agree with that.
Right? Like, nobody consciously wants that. Yeah. It's a compulsive reaction to trying to stay safe if we're really boiling it down. Exactly. Which sounds crazy, but when you boil it down and you realize, oh, right, that whole thing around like familiarity is safety because we know how to navigate it, and we don't know who we are without these things or with these other things, then we're going to stay stuck.
Yeah.
There's going to be resistance to that change.
And that's why I say in general, the outside world doesn't help because it's set up to be an entrapment frequency, and what we're being entrapped in is fear. And when we fear about everything, about money, about love, about age, about the way everything is fear, that this entire world is built upon that. And
right. Which is the opposite of love, which goes back to the conversation about how do we stay grounded in whatever's going on around us. When I'm talking about staying connected and finding beauty, really what we're talking about is looking for love.
Yeah, and I think it first has to be inside. So I think when people, it's the unity. I think we're moving into unity. It's merging the inner masculine and feminine within us, like getting them into unity inside of ourselves so we can hold all of the stuff that we're talking about and balancing it out. And I agree that this is why I'm okay even like cursing, or people are like, oh, you're so spiritual, you're not supposed to. Because there also is healthy forms of anger, right? And healthy forms.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's just too much anger or misdirected anger.
It's not I'm not triggered. Like if I'm going to use it, it's conscious, right? I'm like, okay, I'm about to use this. So I know what I'm doing. It's not like, oh, it's so. But until we get to know ourselves and we get to know what's from something else, has nothing to do with this moment. Until you really get to know yourself, you can't even trust your instincts. You can't even really call it intuition. Because what you sometimes think is intuition is really just triggers, right? Like that bad feeling.
Well, and that's where we go back to our emotions are a compass, right? Because a lot of our intuitions come through emotions.
Yeah.
And if you are constantly anxious, your compass is broken because your anxiety can't talk to you. Exactly. So if you're, if it's working and we're not constantly anxious and we're anxious appropriately, say we're walking home one night and we turn down a dark alley and we get like a few feet in and all of a sudden we suddenly feel anxious, even though we walk down the street every single night and we've never felt anxious, right? But now all of a sudden we feel anxious. We're looking around, we don't see anything. Doesn't matter. Get out. Your body is telling you, because again, everything is energy. We know. Yeah. That's our intuition speaking to us. Yeah. But if you're chronically anxious, you're not going to know to not walk down that alley because you're always anxious. You're not going to know to not enter that deal or to avoid that job or to do whatever because you're always anxious. Yeah.
And you'll mistake that sometimes. Oh, I shouldn't be doing this. But it's really you don't even know because you're not even clear on.
Well, and also the subtleties. Like we're so detached from our emotions, we can't tell the difference between anxiety and excitement.
Exactly. I agree. Oh, this is so good. So last question, when do people usually find themselves at your or someone like you? And then also, I know psychology today, outside of you, like where can people find this kind of work? So if they wanted to work with someone like you or you, where can they find this?
All right. So the people who come to me, typically, I tend to attract people who have had a lot of child. Not always, this is a generalization. I tend to attract women who, like I said, are kind of high achievers, overachiever, perfectionists, who have had a lot of trauma, usually with a mentally ill parent. Why? Because that was what I overcame or currently working on. Will forever work on. I mean, I'm nowhere near what I was, but I do feel like growth is a continuum, right? So a lot of times people come to me when people come to me, they often feel lost. They often check a lot of boxes on paper. So things look really good on paper, but they feel like I should be happy, but I'm not. And I don't understand why. They often have a hard time creating connections with other people and they don't know why, so generally they're smart people who have done all the typical things and they're not working. Yeah. And so
are they using
I also get a lot of very cerebral people. Also something that I'm guilty of is overthinking. I need to understand why, I need to understand how.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to overthink this to solve it because, smart people are really good at problem solving, generally speaking. But then we get into this realm, and this is more about feeling, which a lot of smart people are also very good at disassociating from. So really what it is if I'm going to boil it down, it's people who have more often than not been disconnected from their feelings and don't know how to reconnect.
And that doesn't mean that you're not an emotional person, because I've
for sure. Right, I even when I was super disconnected from my feelings, I was a big crybaby. I am like super emotional.
Yeah,
that's make fun of me all the time. Like something's pretty, I cry. Yeah. Something's overwhelming, I cry.
Exactly.
I'm super happy, I cry.
But for the listeners, because that's what I thought. That's where I thought I'm emotional. I feel everything. I talked about this in the last episode, feeling the feeling, because I really thought that I didn't know how dissociated I was. So,
well, and what it is you're connected to the feelings that are safe, right? But we all have pieces of ourselves that are scary that we've filed away, that we're avoiding. But they're all, make no mistake, whatever it is that you think you have outran, you have not. It is right on your back.
Exactly.
And it's going to come up at some point.
Exactly.
And when it starts to rear its head, it's very scary because we've avoided feeling it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we need support and we need to create some space and grow our capacity. And And another thing that I think is really important that we haven't talked about in that space is, and this is a problem with me, and this is something that I think is very common with anybody who's experienced trauma, especially childhood trauma, is most childhood trauma people, right? People that have had that, most of them talk about having to weather it alone and not being able to trust the people around them, or just having nobody that could help them, right?
Yeah.
And so what that creates is really hyper independent people, which a lot of times on paper, how much do we glorify that in our culture?
Yeah.
Right? This hyper independence is so like, oh my God, they are just a one woman show. They can just walk in a room, assess the situation, fix it all on their own and leave, right? Like these are all the people that are great in a traumatic situation, right? Like they can walk in and when the shit's going down and fix it all. But that kind of hyper independence that I don't need anybody else or nobody can do it as what, that's all signs of trauma.
Yeah.
And to be able to fix that, another piece around like how do you start to heal trauma is co-regulation is a really big one.
Yeah.
You're not going to do this alone. It doesn't need to be me. It doesn't need to be, sometimes sometimes your partner is enough. You can read a book and do certain things, but as long as there's active co-regulation where your partner is actively holding space for you in that, and holding accountability in certain ways, that sometimes that's enough, but usually it's some version of a practitioner, facilitator, psychologist, whatever.
Yeah.
You need co-regulation.
Yeah.
So that you can learn that you can trust other people, and not just you need to. No, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. We are a tribal species. We need each other. Mm-hmm. We need community.
And unity, yeah.
Which goes back to how do we ground ourselves? Like, yeah, you look for beauty, you look for this, but you also look for community. How do you, if you are feeling alone and disconnected, I would ask myself, and desperate because of the situation or powerless because of these situations, sure, you may not be able to save your neighbor, these people from this other community being swept up by ice, or, the people that are being bombed oceans away. You might not be able to do anything about that, but what you can do is create a community where you are. And if that feels too much, then go volunteer. You can't help them, but you can help somebody.
Yeah, and it starts with us. It starts with the individual making a choice, and community could be just two people. It doesn't have to.
Community can be two people for sure. Start to have coffee with your friends.
Yeah,
you're a dude. Go. I mean, whatever it is, like have a weekly date with friends, and that you never see, or even if it's a phone date. Yeah. 8 minutes. Like Simon Sinek talks about this. There was a study done. And suicidal people, if they were given 8 minutes of time, were a friend of connection, where a friend listened to them.
Yeah.
It dissipated almost entirely. It's when we talk about being grounded because all these horrible things are happening in the world. Listen, as scary as all of this is, and it's not scary, and horrific atrocities are happening in the world, right? But we're also the safest we've ever been. That problem is we're privy to everything that's happening in every corner of the world. Used to, we only saw the atrocities that happened in our backyard, right? In our village, in our house, in our village. And maybe we heard about the village next door because we were gossipy little monkeys, right? Or because the person committing the atrocity was like traveling, so you knew to watch out for this guy because he was dangerous or whatever.
Kim, I love this conversation. Right. You said something, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was something about we only do things when we feel emotionally safe, in the places we feel emotionally safe, or the emotions we feel emotionally safe in. And it made me, think about, this is why I have so much compassion for men, because the only place that they have felt safe to express their emotions is when it comes to anger, when it comes to war, when it comes to protecting and fighting. They haven't explored these other places. So it's very interesting. But this has been wonderful. I'm so glad you've been on. I want to say we need a part two, but this is almost 2 hours, so it's going to wind up being several episodes. I just wanted to wrap up with, if people want to find you or someone like you or this type of work, where do you suggest that they start?
I would suggest, specifically to this type of work, I would suggest the internet. You know, Google is your friend, and we now have such access to social people. You know, so many people are so active on social media, you really do get a sense of who they are. So I would Google types of energy work first and start to look at different modalities and read about them. And if something is a hit that feels like is applicable or something useful to you, then I would start to look at practitioners of, you know, just Google practitioners of that, and then start to investigate their social media and their presence, and have they written anything, to get a vibe on who they are, if they have referrals or testimonials. And then, like anything else, you're going to have to shop them, right? Like, just like you do your chiropractor or your dentist, or your therapist. You know, I don't know anybody who chose their very first therapist they went to, actually. You know, like, that's like the unicorn. And this is no different. So if you go to somebody and you're not feeling them, or you have a bad experience, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would go to the next person, keep researching and going to the next person. Also, Psychology Today does have some people on there, and that,
This is super helpful. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.